What's going on, guys? Overman back again, and I've been playing quite a bit of No Man's Sky this past week, and while I think that the concept of exploring this huge universe is really cool and interesting, I've encountered quite a few things that I don't like about No Man's Sky, so let's get right into it. And the first thing that I'm going to start off with is the combat. Right off the bat, when I first tried out No Man's Sky, I realized that the combat in this game is complete ass. Now I get it, this game is all about exploration, not blowing shit up. This isn't a first-person shooter, I know, but that doesn't mean that the combat has to be this bad, right? I mean, honestly, they should have just left the combat out of the game completely, because it's so bad that it doesn't really add any value to the game. If anything, it just annoys you and takes away from the exploration. Now I get it, they probably wanted a little combat in there so that there was some variety in the gameplay, but if you're gonna do something, do it right. I'm not looking for top-notch shooting mechanics that you'll find in AAA FPS, but at the very least, if you put combat in your game, it should be fun. Killing shit is one of the most fun things that you can do in video games. How did you screw that up? And that actually leads me to the second thing that I hate about No Man's Sky: the console controls and the field of view. No Man's Sky has got to be one of the most clunky games that I have ever played. The movement feels slow and unresponsive, and the controls are just dumb. For example, on the PS4, you press the right analog stick to sprint, which is weird because in most games, the default controls will have you press the left analog stick to sprint. But no worries, right? Just change the control scheme in the settings to something more familiar. Oh wait, you can't. Seriously, why the hell in 2016 can we not change control schemes? This has been a feature in video games for God knows how long. How did you guys forget to put this one in the game? And if you didn't want to allow us to change the controls, why did you make the default control scheme so foreign to most players? You could have at least chose a scheme that most people would be familiar with, but nope, you couldn't do that. That would make too much sense. And what about the field of view? Why is the field of view in this game so damn low? This is causing some people to feel physically ill, and it just makes for an even clunkier and more uncomfortable experience. Also, something else that ties in with the sucky combat, it's incredibly difficult to aim with a controller. I don't know what it is about the way you move in No Man's Sky, but I find it very hard to stay on target when I'm shooting those flying alien robots that come after you for mining resources. So with all of that being said, you would think that the PC version would be the one to get, right? Of course not, because the PC port is trash. Now, I actually got really lucky in this regard. The only issues that I've suffered from are stuttering and the occasional massive frame drop. There were many people that gave up and refunded the game because they couldn't even get it to open. And then there was a bunch of people who got it to open only for it to crash right after the logo screen. And then there's even more people who actually got to play the game and suffered from numerous crashes that wiped a bunch of their progress. And we can't forget about the people who have top-notch GPUs like GTX 980 Ti's or 1080s with an overclocked i7, and then they're only getting like 15 frames per second. All of this for a game with pretty subpar graphics for 2016 in my opinion. And you know, I was legitimately surprised by this. I figured since this game was coming from an indie team and it was all about exploration, they would take care of the PC more than the PS4 because this type of game seems to be at home on the PC. And playing the PS4 version only reinforced that idea because I'm like, wow, the controls really suck. I bet this would play a lot better with a mouse and keyboard. And I figured that the reason for that was that the PC was going to be Hello Games' premier platform for No Man's Sky. I figured that the reason that the PS4 version was being released early was because Sony paid to get an earlier release date, and while that still may be true, it's pretty obvious that they needed the extra time for last minute tweaks on the PC port, which ended up being a big fat turd anyways. And you know, even if the PC port wasn't a turd, you'd still have to deal with number 4 on my list, which is boring planets. The majority of planets that I've visited in No Man's Sky have been pretty shit. They've been big red balls devoid of grass, trees, water, and interesting animals. These types of planets are no fun to explore because there's just nothing to see or do, and it's especially disheartening when you encounter a bunch of planets like these in a row, and that seems to be the norm from what I've read. A lot of people are saying that they found a bunch of boring planets before they could find one interesting one, and this really makes me not want to play the game anymore because in No Man's Sky, when you're on a boring planet, you might as well not even play the game because cool planets filled with life like the ones that we saw in the trailers are the reason why we were excited for the game. Now, I will mention that having to go through a bunch of boring planets before finding a good one makes finding the good ones more exciting and more of an event, but in my opinion, from what I and many others have experienced, you have to go through too many boring planets right now. The ratio of good planets to bad planets is way off. And you know what's the really shitty thing? When you finally find a good planet, you can't even enjoy it properly thanks to number 5 on my list, which is the inventory system. This right here is one of the most infuriating things about the game. No Man's Sky is all about exploring, but the inventory system ruins that because you run out of space so fast that you're either forced to cut your exploration short or dismantle some of your stuff and continue a little longer before having to leave because you don't want to dismantle anything else. And on top of that, you're required to keep a few elements on you at all times just to refuel your ship, your gun, and your life support that's always fucking low for some reason, even when it's not. But anyways, I don't even understand why the inventory system is so damn restrictive. It's ruining the best part about No Man's Sky, and honestly, the exploration is one of the few things that this game has going for it. You know, I understand why in other games like Destiny or Call of Duty, the devs want to slow down your progression, but why do it here in No Man's Sky? A small inventory makes no sense for this game at all. There's way too many things to mine and collect. Oh, and I forgot, if you build upgrades, that takes up an inventory slot too. Like, what the hell? Why did you make that a thing? Like, did you guys seriously play this game and think that this inventory system was fun? I don't understand how Hello Games could shoot themselves in the foot like this. I haven't played No Man's Sky in a couple of days, and this is the primary reason why. Shit. When you overcome all of the other issues that this game has, and you finally find a good planet, the inventory system ruins it for you. Now, number 6 is going to be boring aliens. The aliens in No Man's Sky do nothing besides stand there and yabber on in some foreign language. They have no personality and give you no reason to want to interact with them, which is such a shame. This game is all about exploring the universe, and one of the most interesting things about exploring the universe is finding other intelligent life forms. I mean, think about Mass Effect. There's a bunch of interesting alien species in that game. You got the iconic Krogans that are super tough because of how fucked up Tuchanka is, and then you got the Solarians who are really into science and are just generally hyperactive due to their super high metabolisms. You got the Turians who are very strict and militaristic. Then you got the Volus who are very good with money, who eventually formed an alliance with the Turians because the Turians aren't very concerned with economics. And you don't have any of that in No Man's Sky. I've heard from a few people that it's basically a Destiny kind of thing where there's a bunch of lore and stuff like that, but it's not in the game, so whatever. And honestly, putting some of that lore into the game would have helped out with the next problem, which is the repetition. You go to a planet, feed some animals, wait for them to poop out some goodies, rage because you ran out of inventory space, sell and or discard some of your stuff, rinse and repeat. And that's about it. But I know some of you will make the point that every game has some amount of repetition in it, and that's very true. But the problem with No Man's Sky is that not much changes. Of course, the game is all about going to different planets and gathering resources so that you can upgrade your stuff and explore more planets. That's fine. The problem is that after a while, you kind of realize that procedural generation is a gimmick, at least in this game. And that's because a lot of these planets feel very samey. Some of them are barren wastelands that don't have much to see, and some of them are grassy planets with interesting wildlife. And that's pretty much it. The problem here is that there's a large quantity of planets, but most of these planets are of very low quality. Sure, when you first find some grassy planets with weird animals on it, it's cool, it's interesting, but after a few of those, you realize that there's not much to see in this game. How ironic for a game that boasts a universe so large that we'll never explore all of it. But the thing is, before the game came out, many of us wanted to explore all of it, or at least try, but now many of us realize that would be pointless because of how repetitive these planets are. After you've seen a couple dozen of planets, you've pretty much seen them all. Now, I haven't finished the game, and I haven't made it to the center of the universe. Maybe it gets better there, but should we really have to spend hours and hours mining resources and visiting boring planets just to get to the good bits? I don't think so. And all of this repetition contributes to my next issue with the game, which is the lifeless world. When I'm exploring the universe in No Man's Sky, it just doesn't feel alive to me. Now, I understand that this is super subjective, but hear me out. All of the planets that I've explored feel dead, regardless if they have life or not. Because here's the thing, even if you find animals on a planet, how many animals are you gonna see? You're gonna see a handful over here and a handful over there. And most likely, they're gonna be of the same species. And that doesn't seem very realistic to me. Now, I'm not saying that I wanna see a planet with over 8 million species of animals like we have right here on Earth, but I think that there should have been more animals on each planet because right now, it just feels silly and dead. And honestly, it doesn't even make sense that there would only be 1 or 2 species of advanced life forms on an entire planet. And speaking of which, that brings me to number 9 on the list, which is that the animals suck. I mean, for the most part, they all behave very similarly. They walk around and do their thing. It's not like certain species have certain behaviors or anything. For the most part, they just walk around aimlessly until you try to feed them because then they run away. And you know, I can halfway understand why it is that way. With all this stuff being procedurally generated, I guess it would be pretty difficult to generate generate different behaviors that match up with the way that these animals look. But the thing that pisses me off most about the animals is that they didn't even show all of these shitty animals in the trailers. In the trailers for No Man's Sky, they only show the best and coolest animals, which is infuriating because those animals seem to be pretty rare. The animals that you encounter most often are nowhere near as cool as the ones that you see in the trailers, and I feel like that's very misleading. Which leads me into the final thing that I hate about No Man's Sky, and it's not even something about the game, it's about the guy that promised us so much and delivered so little, Sean Murray. Now I'm picking on Mr. Murray because he's been the one communicating with us, and geez man, where do I even start with this guy? I mean, for the longest while he was saying that you could see other players out there in the universe, and while I never picked up this game with the intention of getting into some PvP action, it was really cool to think that there were thousands of other people out there exploring planets just like I was. And maybe, just maybe, I could see one of them at some point. I never expected to find another player with how big this game is, but it's not about that. It's about the magic of knowing that there are other people out there. Just like we can assume that there's most likely other intelligent species out here in our very own universe. But it seems like that's not the case with No Man's Sky. Well, honestly, I don't even know what the case is, because it's not just that Sean Murray lied. Another issue he's had is that he's not very transparent either. Just look at the tweets that this guy put out after two players went into the same planet on stream and couldn't see each other. Two players finding each other on stream in the first day. That has blown my mind. He totally ignores the fact that the two players couldn't see each other, which is infuriating.
How could you live with yourself?
But the bigger thing is, why? Why couldn't they see each other? Why couldn't he answer to that? Is it because you simply cannot see other players in the world? Or was this a technical issue that they're working on? Psh, who knows, because Sean Murray sure as hell hasn't said anything. And you know, I really don't want to be a dick, but Sean Murray is just asking for it, man. Instead of answering the tough questions and taking responsibility for the deception and the shitty PC port, he just dodges the questions and or talks about how many people are playing his game.
How could you live with yourself?
Like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with you lying or the PC port being total shit? Honestly, it would have just been better if he didn't say anything at all and he just talked about whatever patch that they were working on, because his responses, if you can even call them that, just piss people off even more. But that's it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash that like button. If you're not feeling too shy, drop a comment down below and let me know what you hate about No Man's Sky. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow me on Twitter. Link will be in the description box below. That's it for me though, guys. Over, man.